Now, investors have been inundated about news of the metaverse. And for video game companies, this idea of developing digital worlds isn't something that's really new. It's what they've been working and building for decades. And as we've seen this big scramble to develop the emerging technology that's going to be needed to power the next version of the web, major tech firms are looking to the world of gaming with the metaverse in mind. Now, joining me to discuss all this and talk about the future of the video game industry is Scott Porter. He's the West Region Media and Entertainment Consulting Services Leader at EY, which recently put out a report that looks at how the metaverse is factoring into some of the strategic initiatives of these video game companies. So, Scott, thanks so much for joining us today. And, just to kind of give a big picture, first of all, how is the metaverse really playing into the plans of a lot of these video game companies, and how is it going to impact the industry?
Yes. Thank you, Alexis. When we conducted our research, we selected 200 companies globally and went out and talked to a number of executives in the C-suite, product owners, every conceivable part of the value chain. And they all came back and everyone recognized that the metaverse is coming. It is going to be the next big thing. However, it's still a little bit uncertain as to how this is all going to play out. So we have a number of companies that have said they're going to make significant investments, and we've already seen that from the time that we initiated the study. We are hearing about investments in technology, investments in kind of what their strategy is going to look like. And I think we're in the early stages of these companies trying to figure out what is really going to work. They're going to have changes to their business models. They're seeing new revenue opportunities. They're trying to find ways of actually engaging with their consumers so they can bring the content that they've had for many years that has been so popular and bring that to now an emerging group of consumers as well. So they're not going to be bounded by the traditional gamers. They're looking at how do we attract in the non-core gaming community into our space so we can turn them into customers as well.
Right. And as you mentioned, it feels like we're kind of just at the beginning of all of this. And, there are a lot of investments being made. Of course, we all know about Facebook's pivot to Meta, Microsoft acquiring Activision in a huge $70 billion deal, a lot of other acquisitions happening in this area. So can you talk about what these companies are actually looking to invest in? Where are those dollars going right now?
So as you mentioned, we've seen over the last couple of years some significant acquisitions that you just mentioned. There are rumors of additional ones coming up. However, a majority of the respondents in our survey had suggested that in the future, their growth is going to come from organic growth, less from the acquisition side. And the investments that they're making are in the development of content, bringing in talent, also bringing in technology talent as well. So understanding that, again, with the metaverse and as gaming is evolving, they're going to need new skill sets in AR, VR, 3D. All of these things that we're hearing about right now are going to become more and more commonplace in the gaming platforms. And so these companies are looking at how do we bring in that talent and harness that talent so we can develop it ourselves.
Right. I was going to say a lot of that spending probably internally with the research and development is, like you said, an example of that with Unity Software trying to develop their VR and AR capacity. So a lot of investment being made into the R&D aspect of that as well.
Right. And when we did the survey, we looked at it through the lens of gaming companies. But what you also see happening now are non-traditional gaming companies, the large technology companies, other types of content or entertainment companies that are getting into the space, recognizing that there is a lot of value in this digital entertainment. And it's not just passive, somebody sitting there and consuming the entertainment. It allows your consumers to interact with one another and to actually play a role in the development of the content. So we're starting to see this real convergence taking place. As you mentioned, there was a large acquisition of a publisher by a technology platform company. we anticipate that we're going to see more of those in the future, as it was reported in our study. However, you're going to start to see then non-traditional players that are going to start taking concepts of gamification and bringing, so it could be retail and consumer products companies that are also going to be getting into the space. So I've jokingly said to a number of people that in the future, almost every type of company will become ultimately some form of a gaming company.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You talked about that organic growth, and I think of Roblox, when you jump into their financials, their management has been very vocal about the fact that a lot of their revenue is coming from the sale of virtual items on that platform. And we've seen kind of some experimentation with NFTs and other digital assets. So can you talk a little bit maybe about some of the opportunities and challenges here of trying to monetize these digital assets, so to speak?
Yeah. So NFTs have gotten a lot of attention recently. We've heard about the sales of the images or the collectible NFTs and the boom and bust cycles that we're experiencing right now. But again, I would just remind everybody that we're in the very early stages. And so these digital assets, which are really kind of core and central to the gaming environment, you have the skins that your avatars can dress up in. You have other digital assets that allow for the playing of these games to enhance that experience for the players or the consumers. But what our survey also revealed was that the majority of executives in the gaming companies recognize that it's still very early stages, and most of them really haven't figured out how to monetize these NFTs. So they're looking at, in the future, there will be new revenue models associated with them. It is a way of retaining value for the consumers in these technology environments, and they're trying to figure out how are they going to use that to enhance the customer experience, to draw in and retain customers into their ecosystems. Also, how do you allow the customers to monetize those investments in secondary markets? So these are all things that the companies are wrestling with right now. And while they think there has been a lot of hype recently, the majority of the executives do believe that NFTs really will provide a great opportunity for companies to, again, monetize the relationships that they have with their customers.
Yeah, and one final point I want to touch on, as we talk about NFTs, trying to integrate cryptocurrency, there's so much data that's being generated here. And, what are these companies doing to protect all of this information? I feel like cybersecurity is really going to play a part in this next version of the web, especially when there's just so much information that's going to be out there.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, the majority of the respondents had indicated that cybersecurity, as well as the ability to manage and mine the data that they're collecting, will expand exponentially. As companies move into the metaverse, they will be collecting more and more consumer data. All of our preferences, the activities that we are performing while we're in the metaverse. And so there's estimates that we're now going to get into millions of petabytes, which is a lot of data. And when you think about the hackers and the cybersecurity risks, that is really a treasure trove of information that bad actors are going after. They want to understand, who the consumers are, gain information. Yes, there is, looking for theft of financial assets, et cetera. But these companies, not only the gaming companies, but tech companies and others that will be in the space, whether it's gaming or in the metaverse, have indicated that they will be hiring and looking also to partner with third parties to help them protect what they have, and then also develop strategies that they will be able to harness this data into the future, knowing that it's going to be growing. So you're going to have a lot of data analysts that are going to understand the preferences, patterns, and things like that of consumers. But then also, how do you protect it? And also, how do you make sure that it's not being misused by the companies who are collecting it themselves? That is also a big concern that consumers have now been expressing, knowing that these companies are gathering this data. how is that data being used? And then when you translate that into these digital worlds, most consumers have already indicated that if they don't feel safe and secure and that there's transparency on how the data is being used, that they will likely not stay. So that is something that the companies are going to have to really understand, and they're going to have to get right if they want to be successful in this kind of next Web 3.0.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for your insights. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And you can head over to invest